The diner smelled of burnt coffee, old vinyl, and the kind of heavy, greasy rain that only falls on a Tuesday night in November. It was a quiet night at Sal's diner, the kind of place where the neon sign flickered with a dying buzz and the floorboards groaned under the weight of anyone heavier than a teenager. But the floorboards weren't just groaning tonight. They were practically screaming. Sitting in the back booth, occupying space meant for two grown men, was Silas Vance. To the world, and to the terrified patrons trying not to make eye contact, he was simply there. He wore the cut. The leather vest was weathered, stained with road dust and oil, the patches on the back declaring his allegiance to a club that most people only saw on the news when something went wrong. His arms were as thick as tree trunks, covered in ink that faded into the hair on his knuckles. Bear was just trying to eat his burger in peace. He had been on the road for 6 hours, the vibration of his Harley still humming in his bones. He didn't like being approached. Most people knew that, instinctively. There was an invisible perimeter around him, a zone of danger that said, "Keep walking." But then he felt it, a touch so light he almost mistook it for a draft from the air conditioning vent. But it wasn't air. It was a hand, a tiny, trembling hand, gripping the thick, scarred leather of his sleeve. Bear stopped mid-chew. He slowly turned his massive head, his beard brushing against his chest, expecting a waitress with a death wish or a drunk looking for a fight. Instead, he looked down into a pair of wide, terrified blue eyes. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. She was wearing a pink raincoat that was too thin for the weather, and her hair was plastered to her forehead with sweat. She was shaking, vibrating almost as hard as his bike engine. She leaned in close, the scent of strawberry shampoo cutting through the smell of grease and leather. Her voice was barely a whisper, a frantic release of air that hit him right in the gut. She squeezed his arm, her knuckles white, and said the words that would change the entire trajectory of the night. "Please," she whispered, her eyes darting toward the front door. "Please pretend you're my dad. Before we see what happens next, if you believe that true heroes often wear the strangest disguises, please hit that like button and subscribe to Biker Stories right now. It helps us bring you more powerful tales of justice." Bear didn't move. For a second, time seemed to suspend in the diner. The fry cook dropped a spatula in the back, the clang echoing like a gunshot, but neither Bear nor the little girl flinched. Bear looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the sheer terror etched into her face, the way her lower lip quivered, the way she was trying to make herself small, trying to hide inside the shadow he cast. He had seen fear before. He had seen it in the eyes of grown men facing a debt they couldn't pay, and in the eyes of rookies on their first ride. But this was different. This was primal. This was the fear of a gazelle that hears the twigs snap and knows the lion is already in the air. Without asking a question, without hesitating for even a fraction of a second, Bear shifted. The scowl that had been resting on his face for the last decade softened, not entirely, but enough. He shifted his massive bulk on the vinyl bench, the leather creaking loudly, and patted the empty spot beside him. "Hey, pumpkin," Bear rumbled, his voice like gravel grinding together, deep and resonant. He made sure it was loud enough to carry across the room. "I was wondering when you were gonna get out of the bathroom. Your fries are getting cold." The little girl let out a breath that sounded like a sob, scrambling onto the bench and sliding right up against him. She buried her face in the side of his vest. To anyone else, the vest smelled of gasoline and stale tobacco, a scent of danger. To her, in that moment, it must have smelled like a fortress. Bear instinctively lifted his arm, an arm that had swung chains and blocked pool cues, and draped it around her small shoulders. He felt how fragile she was. She felt like a bird, all hollow bones and trembling heartbeats. "It's okay," he murmured, so low only she could hear, his voice dropping below the ambient noise of the diner. "I got you. Who we hiding from?" She didn't speak, she just pointed a shaking finger toward the entrance of the diner. Bear didn't turn his head immediately. He was a hunter. He knew better than to alert the prey that they had been spotted. He picked up a French fry, dipped it casually in ketchup, and used the reflection in the dark window next to him to scan the room. The door chimes jingled. A man had just walked in. He didn't look like a monster. Monsters rarely do. He looked aggressively normal. He was wearing khakis and a gray windbreaker, his hair combed over neatly. But there was something wrong with his energy. He was scanning the room with a frantic, predatory intensity. His eyes were darting from booth to booth, not looking for a table, but looking for a target. He was sweating, despite the chill outside. He took a step further in, wiping his hands on his pants. Bear felt the little girl shrink even smaller against his ribs. She was trying to disappear into him. That was all the confirmation he needed. This guy wasn't a worried parent. A worried parent screams a name. A worried parent runs to the counter to ask for help. This guy was hunting. He was silent, calculating, and he was moving with a sinister purpose. The man's eyes swept over the counter, the empty booths, and then landed on the back corner. He saw the massive biker. He hesitated. Bear saw the calculation in the guy's eyes, the risk assessment. Then the man saw the flash of the pink raincoat tucked under Bear's arm. The man's eyes narrowed. He took a breath, rolled his shoulders, and put on a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was a smile that looked like it had been practiced in a mirror, a mask of plastic concern. He started walking toward the booth. Bear didn't look up. He kept his eyes on his burger, but every muscle in his body was coiled tight. He could feel the adrenaline dumping into his system, sharpening his vision, slowing down time. He took a bite of the burger, chewing slowly, deliberately. "Excuse me," the man said as he reached the table. His voice was oily, overly polite, but with an undercurrent of demand. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. That's my daughter you have there." The diner went silent. Marge, the waitress who had been pouring coffee 3 tables away, froze. The truck driver at the counter swiveled on his stool. Everyone was watching. They saw the giant Hell's Angel type and the clean-cut man standing over him. The visual was striking. Society tells us to trust the man in the khakis and fear the man in the leather. But instincts are older than society, and the air around the table was thick with a wrongness that everyone could feel. Bear chewed for another 5 seconds, letting the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. Then he swallowed. He slowly wiped his mouth with a paper napkin. He didn't just look at the man. He looked through him. He fixed him with a stare that had made grown men back down in prison yards. "Is that right?" Bear asked. His voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "Because she just sat down and called me daddy, and she's shaking like a leaf." "Now, why would my daughter be shaking if she saw you?" The man in the windbreaker laughed, a nervous staccato sound. "Kids, right? They have wild imaginations. She's having a bit of a tantrum. Come on, Lily. Let's go to the car." He reached out a hand to grab her arm. Bear moved faster than a man his size should be able to move. His hand shot out and clamped around the man's wrist. It wasn't a hold. It was a vice. He didn't squeeze enough to break bone, not yet, but enough to let the man know that his hand was now the property of Silas Vance. "I didn't hear you ask her if she wanted to go," Bear said. The man winced, trying to pull his hand back, but he was anchored. "Let go of me." "You're assaulting me." I'm her father. I'll call the police. Please, the little girl whimpered. She finally turned her head, looking up at the man with tears streaming down her face. I don't know him. I don't know who he is. He was following me from the park. He told me he had a puppy in his van. I ran away. The air left the room. The truth hung there, naked and horrifying. The puppy in the van line. The oldest trick in the Predator's handbook. The man's face went pale. The mask of the concerned parent slipped, revealing the cornered rat underneath. He wasn't a father. He was a nightmare in khakis. She's lying, the man sputtered, sweat breaking out on his forehead. She's disturbed. I'm her uncle. Look, let go of me, or you're going to regret it. You don't know who I am. Bear stood up. When Bear stood up, he kept unfolding. He was 6'5" in his boots. He towered over the man, blocking out the dim light of the diner fixtures. He didn't let go of the wrist. He stepped out of the booth, placing his body between the man and the girl. I don't care who you are, Bear growled, his voice dropping an octave, rumbling like thunder on the horizon. But I know who she is. Right now, she's mine. You understand? She's under the protection of the club. The man tried to twist away, his eyes darting to the door. You're crazy. You're a gang member. I'm calling the cops. Marge! Bear barked without looking away from the Predator. The waitress jumped. Yes, Bear, call the cops. Tell 'em we got an attempted kidnapping at Sal's. Tell 'em to hurry. The man in the windbreaker panicked. He realized the narrative had flipped. He wasn't the respectable citizen anymore. He was the suspect. He yanked his arm back with all his weight. Bear, sensing the shift, let him go abruptly. The man stumbled back, crashing into a table behind him, knocking over a ketchup bottle that exploded red across the floor like a bad omen. The Predator didn't wait. He scrambled to his feet and bolted for the door. Don't let him leave, the truck driver shouted from the counter, standing up. But Bear held up a hand. Let him go outside, he said darkly. He ain't going far. Bear turned back to the girl. She was curled into a ball on the bench, sobbing quietly. The sight of her broke something inside his chest, something he thought had scar tissue thick enough to protect him forever. He sat back down, gentle as a lamb. Hey, he said softly. You did good. You were brave. What's your name? For real. Maya. She hiccuped. Maya, Bear repeated. That's a pretty name. My name is Silas, but my friends call me Bear. Are you a bad man? She asked, looking at the skull patch on his vest. Bear looked down at his hands that had done violence, hands that had twisted throttles and broken noses. Some people think so, Maya, but not tonight. Tonight, I'm just the guy standing between you and the bad things. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket. It was surprisingly clean, and handed it to her. We gotta wait for the police, okay? But you don't have to worry. That guy isn't coming back in here. And if he does, he's gotta go through me. And trust me, nobody likes doing that. Maya wiped her nose. She looked at him, studying the beard, the tattoos, the road-worn face. He's still outside, she whispered. He's watching. He's waiting for you to leave me. Bear glanced out the window. Sure enough, the gray windbreaker was there, pacing near a nondescript sedan in the parking lot. The Predator hadn't fled. He was waiting. He probably thought Bear would eat his meal and leave. He probably thought he could wait out a biker. He didn't understand what he was dealing with. He didn't understand the Brotherhood. Bear pulled out his phone. He opened a group chat that usually consisted of jokes and route maps. He typed a single message. Code red. At Sal's diner. Child in danger. Perp in lot. Need the pack. He put the phone down. He can wait all he wants, Maya. He's about to have a very bad night. What would you do in this situation? If a stranger claimed a terrified child was theirs, would you have the courage to intervene, or would you mind your own business? It's a question we all like to think we know the answer to, but fear is a powerful thing. Let us know in the comments what you would have done. 10 minutes passed. The tension in the diner was palpable. Marge had locked the front door, but the man outside was still pacing, talking on his phone now, looking agitated. Maya was drinking a chocolate milk Bear had ordered for her, her small hand gripping his pinky finger like a lifeline. Then they heard it. It started as a low vibration, a hum that rattled the silverware on the tables. Then it grew. It became a roar, a thunderous, synchronized mechanical symphony that everyone in the town recognized. It was the sound of American V-twin engines. Not one or two. Dozens. Lights swept across the front of the diner, blindingly bright. The parking lot, which had been dark and rainy, was suddenly illuminated by 20 headlights. The roar was deafening as the bikes pulled in, circling the gray sedan like sharks, circling a wounded seal. Bear smiled. It was a grim smile, but it was full of pride. "Backup's here," he told Maya. He stood up. "Stay here with Marge, okay? I'll be right back." "Don't leave me," she cried, reaching for him. "I'm not leaving you. I'm just going to make sure he doesn't leave until the police get here." Bear walked to the front door, unlocked it, and stepped out into the rain. The scene in the parking lot was something out of a movie. The man in the windbreaker was pressed against his car, his eyes wide with absolute terror. Surrounding him were 25 members of the Iron Saints MC. They weren't yelling. They weren't attacking him. They were simply sitting on their bikes, idling, creating a wall of noise and chrome and leather. They had formed a perimeter. The man had nowhere to go. Bear walked through the circle of bikes, his brothers nodding to him as he passed. He walked right up to the man, who was now trembling so hard his knees were knocking together. You can't do this." The man shrieked over the rumble of the engines. "This is kidnapping." "This is intimidation." Bear crossed his arms. He didn't touch the man. He didn't need to. "We ain't touching you," Bear said, his voice carrying over the engines. "We're just citizens making a citizen's arrest. We're waiting for the law. But while we wait, we're gonna make sure you don't go nowhere." One of the other bikers, a man named Tiny, who was even bigger than Bear, kicked his kickstand down and walked over. He looked at the man, then looked at the back seat of the sedan. He shone a flashlight through the window. "Bear," Tiny said, his voice cold. "Look at this." Bear leaned in. In the back seat, there was no puppy. There was a roll of duct tape, a pile of zip ties, and a mattress. The intention was clear. The evil was palpable. Bear felt a cold rage settle in his stomach. He looked at the man. "You're lucky the cops are coming," Bear said quietly. "Because if they weren't, you wouldn't be walking away from this." The sound of sirens cut through the night, wailing in the distance, getting louder. The man in the windbreaker slumped against his car, defeated. He knew it was over. The bikers didn't scatter when the police arrived. They stayed put. They killed their engines. Silence rushing back into the parking lot, heavy and judging. 2 police cruisers skidded into the lot. Officers jumped out, hands on their holsters, confused by the scene. A sea of bikers surrounding one man in khakis. "What's going on here?" the sergeant yelled. Bear stepped forward, hands visible. We're holding a suspect for attempted kidnapping. Officer, the victim is inside with the staff. This man tried to take her. Check his back seat. The police were wary, but they did their job. They looked in the car. The mood shifted instantly. The handcuffs came out. The man in the windbreaker was read his rights, shoved into the back of a cruiser, his face hidden from the shame. Bear watched him go, feeling the tension slowly drain from his shoulders, but the job wasn't done. He turned and walked back into the diner. Maya was standing by the window, watching. When she saw Bear come back in, she ran. She didn't walk. She sprinted across the diner floor and slammed into him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you." Bear knelt down, ignoring the pain in his bad knee. He was eye level with her now. "You're safe now, Maya. The bad man is gone." The door opened again, and a woman rushed in, frantic, hair wild, flanked by a police officer. Maya. "Oh my God, Maya!" It was her mother. She had been at the park, turned her back for 1 second to throw away a wrapper, and Maya had vanished. The panic of those 20 minutes must have aged her 10 years. Maya released Bear and ran to her mother. The reunion was the kind of thing that makes you believe in miracles. They held each other, crying, rocking back and forth. The whole diner watched. The truck drivers, the weary travelers, and the leather-clad bikers who had filed in from the rain to get coffee. Bear stood up, feeling awkward now. His job was done. He wasn't a hero. He was just a guy who happened to be there. He turned to go back to his cold burger. "Wait." Bear stopped. The mother was standing there, holding Maya's hand. Her eyes were red, but she was looking at Bear with an intensity that pierced his soul. She looked at the scary biker. The man society told her to fear the man with the skull patch and the road grime. "She told me," the mother said, her voice trembling. "She told me what you did. She said you pretended to be her dad." Bear shrugged, embarrassed. "She needed help, ma'am. Anyone would have done it." "No," the mother said, shaking her head. "Not anyone. You did. You saved my baby's life. How can I ever repay you?" Bear looked at Maya. The little girl let go of her mother's hand and walked up to him. One last time. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something. It was a small plastic ring, a prize from a cereal box or a gumball machine. It was pink and plastic and worth absolutely nothing. "For you," she said, holding it out. "So you remember me." Bear, the enforcer for the Iron Saints, the man who could bench press a small car, felt his throat close up. His eyes burned. He reached out with his massive calloused hand and let her drop the tiny plastic ring into his palm. It looked like a speck of dust against his hand. "I don't need this to remember you, kid," Bear said, his voice cracking. "But I'll keep it. I'll keep it right here." He tapped the pocket over his heart. He looked at the mother. "Just keep her close, ma'am. The world is a scary place." "I know," she whispered. "But it's got good people in it, too." Bear nodded. He turned to his brothers, who were filling the diner, ordering pies and coffees, clapping each other on the back. They weren't angels, not by a long shot. They were rough, loud, and lived by their own rules. But tonight, they were the good guys. As Bear walked out the door, slipping the pink ring onto his pinky finger where it barely fit, he realized something. He had lost his own daughter years ago, not to a kidnapper, but to a drunk driver. For a long time he had hated the world. He had hated the unfairness of it. But tonight, for just 20 minutes, he got to be a dad again. He got to protect a little girl. And that was enough. The rain had stopped. The air was crisp. Bear mounted his Harley, the engine roaring to life beneath him. He looked back at the diner window. Maya was waving. He revved his engine, a salute, and rode out into the night, the plastic ring tight against his skin, a reminder that sometimes the scariest people are the only ones who can scare away the monsters. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Biker Stories for more powerful stories about courage, redemption, and the families we choose.